Hey, this is Shalimar Steinberg, and today I am showing the instructions and demonstration for the Gasket lab. So we're going to start out by looking at our drawing here, and we see that we need to create 4 equal-sized circles. And I know they're the same because it says 4 times a circle with a radius, in this case a diameter of 0.5. Then there's a bigger circle around each of those that is a radius of 0.5. So make sure that you do both so that they match up. And because this one is inset from this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a construction line straight down from the center of this one, the 1.75 that I know they're spaced apart, and then in, and the amount for that is going to be 3.5, which is the total from center to center here, minus the edge that's left over from the 2.5. So it's going to be a 0.5 inset, basically. And so I'm going to start out by making sure that I'm on my object line layer. And I'm going to go ahead and do that first circle, which I know is a diameter. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do a circle with a diameter of 0.5. And I have to zoom in because I was zoomed way out, or I can do a zoom extents. There we go. Scroll it a little bit. So now I'm going to go into my construction line layer and draw some spacing things. So I'm going to draw from the center down 1.75 and then over 0.5. Oops, and I tilted, so I need to tab so that I make sure that it's at 0 degrees. And then I'm going to that's to the center of that circle, and then I know that I need to go directly across 2.5 to the center of the other circle, and then out another 0.5 and up the 1.75 again. Okay, now I can go back in, switch back over to my object line layer, and put in the other circles that I need. So one is going to be right here where the endpoints of that section I drew are, and that's going to be 0.5 again. And then the same thing right here, 0.5. Whoops, I did a radius on that one because I didn't tell it specifically. So I'm going to undo that. And 0.5. Now I can go ahead and get rid of these lines if I need to, or just freeze the layer, whichever is easier for you. All right, my next step is going to be to put the rounder or the bigger circle around the same spot. So for that one, I am going to do radius ones. I'm going to use the same center points and a radius of 0.5 this time. So I get a bigger circle around each one. Okay, now I have my circles in. I'm going to go down and make sure that I have the tangent O-snap turned on, and I'm actually going to turn off all of the other ones for right now. I might turn some of them back on later, but I shouldn't need any other ones for this drawing, really. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to draw lines, and I'm going to draw that line so that it is tangent to the upper quadrant of this circle here. So the symbol is above the little quadrant point where the corners are, and then onto the quadrant point for this one right here. And so I get that straight line that is attaching the two pieces. And I can zoom in to make sure they're right where I should have them. I'm going to do the same thing over on this side. And now I've got the only 2 straight lines in the drawing. My next step then is going to be to do some of these arcs that are attaching the parts of the object. And I'm going to do all of those using circles that are tangent, tangent, and then given the specific radius that they require. So for example, if I do these 2 side ones, I'm looking at circles that are 0.625 in radius, and are tangent or touching these two circles. So I'm going to go into the circle command, but I actually want to pick a tangent radius circle from the list. And I'm going to specify that I want it to be tangent to or touching the bottom quadrant of this circle and the top left quadrant of this circle. And then I want it to be a radius of 0.625. And it creates the only possible circle that is the size I told it to and still touches each of those other circles in exactly one spot on the corners that I told it to. So I don't tell it the specific spot to touch them, I just tell them the quadrant in which I want it to touch, and it does the math for me to figure out the best spot. So then I can do that same thing again. Tangent to this circle, tangent to this circle, and the same radius. So now I've got those two circles. At this point, it's a good time for me to trim out the center of those two so that they don't get in my way while I'm doing the next set that I need to. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the trim command. I'm going to remember to hit enter so that it selects everything as a crossing edge, and then just select this portion of each of these circles to get out of the way. All right, now I'm going to do the big arcs. So I'm going to do this big one on the outside and the big one on the outside here. And then instead of having to try and figure out where they touch in the middle of the objects, I'm just going to offset each of those up 0.5 or down 0.5 in this case, because I know that's the difference in radius between these two big arcs and between these two big arcs. So I'm going to go back into that tangent radius circle. And I'm going to pick the outmost right on this side and left on this side. And then I'm going to type in that radius that I need, which is going to be 1.75. And now it's created that circle. I'm going to then do the trim command to get rid of the portions that I don't need. And then I'm going to use the offset command, and I'm going to tell it that 0.5. And I know that it's 0.5 because it's the radius of 2.25 minus the radius of 1.75, and that gives me a 0.5. So I'm going to say 0.5. Whoops, I did that twice. And hit enter. Then I'm going to select this line and just drag it up. And now I just need to trim off the sections that went through. I'm going to do the same thing up on the top. I'm going to do the tangent radius circle. This time I need it to go to the outside top quadrant on both sides. And the radius is going to be 4. So it creates this big circle. Again, I go into trim and hit enter and trim out the portion that I don't need. And if I want to, I can go ahead and trim this section right now as well. Then I'm going to use that offset command again, and the same distance, 0.5. And I'm going to pick this line and move it down 0.5. Now is the time to just finish trimming things out. So I'm going to trim out this section and this that I don't need. And then I just need to trim out the parts of my circles that I don't need. So I don't need this part because I want it to be open. And I don't need this part. This one and this one. This one and this one. And this one and this one. And I have drawn my gasket shape. Now I'm going to go ahead and go into my A-size template, double click into the window, and zoom extents to show my template. So you could actually do this one at like double size if you wanted to. I'm going to see what it looks like at 1:1. That's not bad. I can show all of the measurements at that. I could also change it and do it at a 2:1 if I had that scale available, or I could create a 2:1 scale if I wanted it to be a little bit bigger. But this is pretty good sized for this type of drawing. So I'm going to leave it at 1:1. And that means I need to change, actually I don't need to change that part, but I need to change the other parts of this. Then I'm going to go back into my model space and do my dimensions. So I'm going to switch over to my dimension line layer. And I'm going to do the same dimensions that are on the example drawing there. So I'm going to start out by going to the Annotate tab. And the reason these are shrunk is just because I have the drawing shrunk to some degree. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a linear one first from the center point. And I need to turn my O snaps back on. I shouldn't need the tangent one anymore, but I do want quadrant, center point, endpoint, and midpoint on. So I'm going to do the midpoint of this circle, which actually needs a center mark. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to go to the section right here where it says center mark. And I need to actually be on my center line layer for that. And I'm going to do center mark, and then I'm going to click on the circle that I want it to represent. So this one, this one, this one, and this one. And then I'm going to go into my Dimension Style Manager because I want to actually change it so that there are no center marks on the dimensions because I already put center marks in the objects. And then I also want to change the this to 3 precision and no leading zeros. So I'm suppressing my leading zeros. So I'm going to do that and then set it current and close. Now I can go back to my dimension line layer. And then over here, I'm going to go to linear. And I'm going to start my dimension measuring at the top of the center mark because that is going to give me that little gap that I need there between that and the center mark. Then I'm going to do the one for the side here, which is from this center mark to this center mark, and drag it out. I'm going to do the one for the bottom. And I'm going to drag this one a little further out because I know I need to put those 2 radiuses inside of it. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to the radius ones. And I'm going to do this arc like this. Same thing, this arc. And I'm going to actually put it like that, and then I'm going to click on it to select and move the text over a little bit, like that, so that they line up correctly. Then I'm going to do the same thing and do my one for this arc. And you'll see right now it just says R.5. So I need to double click on it. And then I'm going to put 4 times in front of that, so that it's saying that there's 4 circles that are that same size. Then I'm going to do the same thing, but with a diameter one for the little circles here. And again, go in. Make sure you don't get rid of the diameter sign. It can be a little challenging to find, although it is located under symbols. And then I'm going to do the 4x on that one as well. And then just continue. I need to do a 2x radius on this arc. And then I do not need to do this one because I already did this one and it's showing the same circle. But just because they are trimmed apart and the sides aren't touching anymore, we are going to do it on the outside edge too to show that this radius is the same as this radius. And then the 2 on the top, and you will be good to go. All right.